Okay, now when we start to take a look at the legislative branch in general, the first thing we really need to do is to define a legislature. And a legislature is simply the lawmaking body of a government. And you can find a legislature at all levels of government. In other words, at the local level, like a city, at the state level, and certainly at the federal level. And both the state of Pennsylvania and our federal government both have what is known as a bicameral legislature. Okay, and what that means is that it's a legislature with two separate houses, two separate bodies, both of which have to pass a bill before it becomes a law. Now, we're going to kind of focus on the federal government here at the beginning, and we're going to focus on Congress, which is the umbrella term to describe our federal legislature, which again has two houses, the bigger of which is known as the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives determines how many members will represent each state by population. There are, first of all, a total of 435 members, and then each state has the membership divided by how many people they have. In Pennsylvania, for example, we have only 18 members of the House of Representatives, which is down from 20 prior to the year 2000, because every 10 years in the United States we hold a census. And so in the 2010, 2000, 1990, 1980, and so on, we held a census. And that census then divides the country and the members of the House of Representatives based on population. So since 1999, let's say, Pennsylvania has lost 2 members of the House because its population has declined. Those 2 seats, as we call them, in the House of Representatives have since been given to some other state that had gained in population. And so Pennsylvania right now has 18 representatives. The term length for a member of the House of Representatives is 2 years. And so every 2 years, all 435 members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. So being a member of the House actually really makes you a perpetual campaigner, because by the time you get elected, the next year or so is spent raising money for your next campaign, and the second year is spent running for re-election. And surprisingly, really, when you look at it like that, the House of Representatives has a very high re-election rate. So we get once you get in the House, incumbents have a good chance to win. Now the second house in Congress is called the Senate. Now there are 100 total members, and there's equal representation from each state. So Pennsylvania, along with every other state, has 2 members of the Senate. And a Senate term length is 6 years. Okay, so you have this longer term for members of the Senate. And so you have the House of Representatives and the Senate. And you're going to be directed to complete an activity in which you find out how many Republicans, how many Democrats, how many independents or other third-party members are members of each house, and also which party holds the majority in each house. And that's important because when we take a look at how laws are passed, you're going to see how being the majority party certainly makes things easier. Okay, now one question is, why do we have different term lengths for members of the House, members of the Senate, and the President, who we haven't talked about yet? But members of the House have 2-year term lengths, members of the Senate 6 years, and the President has a 4-year term length. Well, the answer to that is we don't want to have some massive transition at one time. And so members of the House now are all re-elected at the same time every 2 years. But members of the Senate, even though they have 6-year terms, it's not that all 100 senators are up for re-election every 6 years. 1/3 of the Senate runs after 1 year. 2 years later, the second third runs. 2 years after that, the final third runs for re-election. And so at most, in any one Senate election year, we could lose 33 or possibly 34 incumbents if everybody lost. Chances are they don't, though, and so the turnover in the Senate isn't quite as large. The President runs every 4 years, and so we don't really have any one time where government can completely flip with a bunch of inexperienced people. Now, another question is, why do we have 2 separate houses in our federal legislature? And this is more of a historical situation where small states versus large states. The small states wanted equal representation when our legislature was being set up, and the bigger states wanted more representation than the smaller states. So you can probably venture a guess as to which house the big states preferred. It was the House of Representatives, where population determines representation. The Senate was a compromise to keep the small states happy. And so this kind of placated everybody. The big states were happy with the House, the small states were happy with the Senate, because they felt like they had at least a chance to have some say in legislation, and a bill has to pass through both houses to become law. And so that's the next thing you're going to take a look at after you're directed to kind of find the majority parties and the numbers for each party in each house. You're going to take a look at how a bill becomes law. But this is just a basic explanation. Now understand, Pennsylvania as a state has a very similar situation in that we have a state House of Representatives and a state Senate. So we have a bicameral legislature there. And then if you go down to local governments, city councils, borough councils, township councils, sometimes called township supervisors. We have county commissioners. Those are the legislative branches of local government.